Hi everyone, Comic Reviewer here. This time reviewing on Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 1. Now, as you know, this was the issue that started the Ultimate Universe from October 2000 all the way to 2009, with various relaunches, even spawning a TV series, games, and also other merchandise. And the cover mainly has Ultimate Spider-Man swinging into New York, and was shown at Norman Osborn's company, where he's talking to his assistant Joe, mainly about the origin of a Greek character called Arachne, and saying how how basically Hera destroyed her work and actually took pity in that. And of course, we're introduced to the spider that would play a key part in the story. And of course, you have Norman Osborn talking to the person on the phone about animal testing and test subjects. And of course, Joe puts the spider away, which he forgets to close the lid, which of course gets out. And we're shown to Ultimate Peter, where he's having his meal at the food court, and of course gets food thrown at him by Kenny Khan and Flash Thompson. And there was later a main Marvel version of Kenny Khan in a Marvel series. And of course, Peter is just looking around his environment, smiles at MJ, she smiles back, and of course, Flash and Kenny throw more food at Peter. And of course, Peter does feel a bit like an outcast. And as soon as they throw a taco, they start gloating. And Uncle Ben shows up to say that, I was getting some pants, just wanted to see how you were. And Peter thought, you got me off in that. So of course, that Uncle Ben kind of gets MJ together. And you can tell Uncle Ben is a bit more disgusted with Flash and Kenny Khan's behaviour. So of course they do talk, bringing a bit more light into Peter's atmosphere. So we see Peter getting bullied by Kenny Khan and Flash again. And of course Harry does try to talk with them to back it off. The principal shows up and does tell Peter to tell him if anything like this happened again. And of course, Harry does try to be a friend to Peter, and of course does want him to help him with his homework, and says to meet him at his house at some point. So we're shown at the sports gym where the coach tries to get everyone to play basketball, and gets Peter to throw a shot, and of course misses, and he says, "A woman, I swear to God!" So of course Flash does joke with him again, and you can tell Peter does get annoyed. And we're kind of seeing how Ultimate Aunt May is talking about this, social anxiety disorder, and does try to talk with Peter, and so does Uncle Ben. But of course, Aunt May tries to remind Peter, reading at the table. And of course, she does say that she'll look it up. And I like how Uncle Ben in this does play more like a father figure to Peter. So we're shown at Peter's lab in the basement, where Harry Osborn is amazed by Peter's stuff, and looks at his notes and that. And he looks at this liquid which he thinks he's going to blow up the school with, but of course points out that it's his parents' work, and the liquid would play a key part for his wedge shooters. So we kind of see Norman Osborn talking with someone about the company laws and everything else, but of course gets hung up by his call. And of course, Harry does remind his dad about mostly the field trip and that at his lab. So Norman does call out for his wife to bring Harry out of the room, so Joe does it himself. And we're shown at Oscorp Industries, where Peter and his class are being shown around. But of course, Peter gets bitten by the spider, which flungs on Mary Jane, saying, "Oh my God!" And later, Kenny does step on it. And of course, Peter ends up barfing and kind of going into a sort of coma, but later comes to. And they talk about that they've got Aunt May to kind of be there at the school to pick him up. And you can tell MJ does try to be there for Peter. And of course, Norman finds out that the spider escaped and bit Peter Parker and isn't too pleased about the spider being destroyed. And of course, they decide to pay for Peter's hospital bills and also to send a fruit basket. And we kind of see how Aunt May and Uncle Ben see that Peter is sleeping and that they're not going to sue Norman Osborn, as that Harry's been more of a friend to Peter. And of course, we see how Flash and Kenny Con sort of joke around with Peter and even make him feel more and more bad. And of course, Peter does sort of flung Kenny Con down, which is only the start of his spider powers. And as soon as the teacher comes through, Peter goes into another state. And pretty much wakes up to find him in a hospital. And turns out the doctors are going to take blood and urine samples. And are going to see what's been going on. And of course, the blood sample does get stolen and replaced. And they find out that something's happened with Peter's bloodstream. They think he's dying, so they send the assassin Saul to take care of it. So of course, Aunt May makes some banana bread for Peter to try and eat. And we see how Saul tries to go for Peter under Norman Osborn's orders. And Peter manages to fling successfully, surviving it. And of course does try to get his gun. Peter leaves. And Norman does tell Saul to back off, as he wants Peter alive, not dead. And we see how Peter realizes the spider that bit him gave him powers. And of course does do some analysis on the spider, like how it has all these powers and abilities, and how it gave him the powers. And we find out that Peter has been skipping school. He tries to explain that he feels like an outcast, and that he feels like it's not what he wants. So of course Uncle Ben and that decide to send him to his room to cool him off. And we see how Peter wakes up, and of course goes on the wall, showing his spider powers. So issue 1, I would say, is not too bad. I feel like if they replaced Mary Jane with Gwen Stacy, focused a bit more on the environment, it could have been a little better. And I think movies like the 2002 Spider-Man movie got right. A good start, a good plan, I give it a thumbs up. Still good, and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.